behalf of the External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, Foreign Secretary Shri Vijay Gokhale, senior officials from the Ministry of External Affairs, I extend a very warm welcome to you on this much anticipated press conference by the External Affairs Minister. This press conference, the first by the External Affairs Minister since he assumed this office, is on the occasion of 100 days of this ministry under the present government. We will start with the initial remarks by the Honorable Minister. After that, we will open the floor to questions. So,
thank you very much. Good afternoon, and let me say what a pleasure it is to see you again. This press conference, as JSXP just told you, is to share with you what we believe are our achievements over the first 100 days of the government. Before I come to that, let me emphasize that actually in the case of the Ministry of External Affairs, it started on day one with the invitation which was extended to leaders of the BIMSTEC to join in the inauguration, in the swearing-in ceremony of the new government. Now, I would like to provide you a little context here before we actually come to the achievements of the 100 days. And the context is the broad foreign policy approach. And I think all of you know that we've developed that conceptually quite a lot over the last 5 years. So I'll walk you a little bit through that concept and its evolution. But in the case of Ministry of External Affairs, you would also appreciate that a lot of the achievements, in a sense, this would be an activity-based account because a lot of it would be visits and interactions and conversations which would lead to outcome, some immediate but some over a longer period of time. So if I were to give you that context starting with foreign policy, and in a sense what is different in the foreign policy approach that we have been following, not just in the last 100 days but in the 5 years before that. To me, 2 or 3 very sharp points stand out. One, of course, is that much more than before, there is a linkage, a very strong linkage between what we are doing at home for national, economic and social progress and what we are doing abroad in terms of diplomacy. That we are leveraging global capabilities, global technology, global best practices, global resources, partnerships in many ways. And you can see that if you were to today look at a visit, incoming, outgoing, a summit, you see many more economic outcomes, more technology or project-based decisions. Often, say, for example, whether it's smart cities or cleaning rivers, a lot of best practices. So the collaborations in many ways, I think, have become a much more salient part of foreign policy. And here there have been sort of 5, I would say, big hubs for this. North America, Europe, Northeast Asia, ASEAN and the Gulf. There are, other relationships also which I will touch on. The second difference again would be a much stronger connection between our national security interests and foreign policy. That if you, again, whether you look at the relationship, you look at the activities, you look at the capabilities that we are trying to develop, this correlation between what are our national security goals and what are our foreign policy goals, I think, has also become very much stronger. Now, naturally, the foreign policy of every country, there is a standard international relations sort of exercise at play. Nations sort of compete with each other to increase their influence. Everybody wants to increase their footprint. But here, I think, again, my third point would be that our ability, our appetite to shape the global agenda today is very much more than it was before. And you can see that in an area like climate change. I think you will be seeing that as the SDGs implementation unfold. I think today, if you look at the big debates at multilateral forums, at G20, at BRICS, you will see that the Indian voice, the Indian views are today heard much more clearly. The diaspora is, of course, the fourth and in many ways a somewhat unique aspect of our foreign policy, and that is underlined by what is going to be coming up very soon in the United States, which is a big diaspora event in partnership with our Indian American community. In terms of how, again, we broadly see the world, there's a, we've had the view that there is a rebalancing going on in the world, that the world is moving towards growing multipolarity. And growing multipolarity really means multiple narratives. That India has to be seen, India has to be heard, India has to be, in a sense, contributing in many ways. And India's personality on the international stage has to express itself. That's happened, say, through a vehicle like the International Day of Yoga in the past. But in the immediate, particularly in the last 100 years, a lot of our energies have gone into the celebrations and events, the commemoration events which mark the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi and the 550th anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Now, in addition to all of that, I think we, of course, like any other country, would want to put out our narrative, our specific interests. And in the last 100 days again, some of that has gone to the message of change, the vote of confidence that the government got from the electorate, the fact that we are back, what that means. Also issues like, which have had some foreign policy resonance, like the changes to Article 370, and of course some of the longer standing issues, especially cross-border terrorism. Now, in terms of what we have seen, and I would say in the last 100 days, the first circle of priority is neighborhood, and rightly we call it neighborhood first. And again, many of you are familiar, neighborhood first is about connectivity, it's about commerce, it's about contacts. And we've had Prime Minister, in fact, begin his foreign travel as he did previously in the neighborhood with Maldives. Since then, he's been to Sri Lanka, after Maldives, he went to Sri Lanka, he's been to Bhutan. And I myself have covered Bhutan, Maldives, Bangladesh, Nepal. And we've had incoming visits from Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan as well. And what we do expect to see going forward is a continuation of this generous, non-reciprocal policy towards our neighbors, which will focus a lot on projects, on people-to-people contacts, on business contacts. And we hope really to build a stronger, better neighborhood, but recognizing that we have a unique challenge from one neighbor, and that until the issue of cross-border terrorism is successfully addressed, and until that neighbor becomes a normal neighbor, that would remain a challenge. Moving on in the extended neighborhood, again, in many ways, you know that there were initially political sort of divides after independence, which prevented us really from harnessing the full possibilities of culture and history and economics out there. But today, between look east towards ASEAN and what we are doing in the West, and in fact, Foreign Secretary has just come back today from Iran, we've really done, I think, an enormous amount to change the relationship, change perceptions of India, both to the East and the West. In the East, a lot of that is centered around connectivity, security, and our support for ASEAN centrality. It is transposed on achievements which we've already had in business, diaspora, and culture. In terms of the contacts over the last 100 days, Prime Minister met many of the leaders of this region at the G20. I went to Indonesia, to Singapore. I went for the ARF in Thailand. In the West, it's equally important. It's been a newer story. This has been, in fact, largely over the last 5 years that we've taken the relationship to where it is today. While it's always been important in terms of energy and diaspora, I think today you have a very large investment relationship, an important security, stability relationship, where we have a lot of common shared concerns on radicalization and counterterrorism. And again, there's been a lot of focus here. Prime Minister went to UAE and to Bahrain. You know that he got the highest awards in these countries. I hosted the UAE Foreign Minister very soon after assuming office. Our Minister of State went to Kuwait. I think he's in Iraq today. We have, among the activities of the last 100 days, we have facilitated our naval deployment in the Straits of Hormuz, and we've supported more than 200,000 Hajj pilgrims going for the Hajj. Now, moving beyond in terms of major powers, we've had our endeavor, of course, is to have the best relations with all these powers so that our options, our positioning is the best. And in the last 100 days, actually, Prime Minister has met the leaders of all the P5 plus 2, plus Germany and Japan. And I met all the foreign ministers except the German, who I hope to meet soon. And some of these were at multilaterals, but we've had a dedicated bilateral summit with Russia at Vladivostok for the Prime Minister, with France during his visit there. I have myself been to China. I also had a bilateral with Japan. And while we did all of this, I think we did this taking full advantage today of a lot of multilateral events, of global opportunities which these conclaves provide. And it tells you today something about the nature of diplomacy, and more important, about India's standing. That if you look even at the last 100 days, we've had the G20 summit, the G7 summit, the Shanghai Cooperation Summit, the Vladivostok, the Economic Forum, the Far East Economic Forum, the CCAR Summit, the ARF meeting, the BRICS, Commonwealth, and we had, of course, BIMSTEC out here. And we've really taken full advantage of this. Prime Minister is extraordinarily energetic, and the rest of us try to emulate that also. So we use each of these opportunities to the extent we can, and I would say I hesitate to give the numbers. I think he probably would have it, but we would really be at least in the middle. He says 28 for Prime Minister's meetings. Mine would be more, partly because of more events that I've attended. In Africa also, we've been very active in the last 100 days, and we regard it today as a focus continent. Our vision for Africa was spelled out by Prime Minister last July at Uganda. And the 18 embassies which we have decided to open are all in Africa. They are opening, many of them as we speak. And we actually had a sort of, in the last week, we had a sort of analysis of, sitting with the AU, a stock taking of where we are. And I think we are largely on track in terms of our Africa commitments. We had made a commitment of $10 billion of lines of projects in lines of credit in Africa. We've crossed 6.5. We've committed to $600 million of grant. We've actually reached 700 million. We had agreed to train 50,000 people in different areas. We've reached 40,000. So the Africa account has been actually extremely energetic. Honorable Rashtrapati ji had visited Benin, Gambia and Guinea. In fact, the first head of state visit we hosted was from Zambia, and Minister of State Muralidharan ji has gone to Nigeria, Cameroon, Togo and Cote d'Ivoire. We've also seen activity in Central Asia. Prime Minister went to Kyrgyzstan for the SCO summit. I went to Tajikistan for the SICA summit. Europe has also received a lot of attention in the last 5 years. Prime Minister himself has led from the front. And again, we see Europe as an important development partner, as for technology capabilities of various kinds, and the fact that we are market economy, the fact that we are democratic societies, I think brings us together. And here again, President has been to Iceland, Switzerland, Slovenia. Vice President's been to the 3 Baltic countries. I have engaged both the outgoing and the incoming European Commission leadership, been to UK, Poland, Hungary and Belgium. And of course, we've had meetings with all the major European leaders and the multilaterals. The picture in Latin America and Caribbean is also moving along. Minister of State, and I must tell you, we expect in these 5 years actually to give this region much more attention than we did in the last 5. So Minister of State has been to Argentina, Peru, Colombia and the Dominican Republic. General V.K. Singh, who was minister with us earlier, went to Brazil. And we've had incoming visits from St. Vincent and Grenadines, and today in fact I had met the Foreign Minister of Grenada. We are concentrating a lot on the CARICOM, with which again we have a very strong historical cultural bonding. We hope to see more of them at the UNGA. And again, we have a variant of this story in Oceania. We will be dealing more with FIPIC. Again, we expect to see them at the UNGA. I've had incoming visits from New Zealand, from the leader of opposition, and there have been meetings both between PM and me where Australia is concerned. So this is a sort of a broad activity story. In terms of practical achievements, a sort of bricks and mortar kind of level achievements, we've actually, even in 100 days, there are projects which we concluded, and inaugurated. There are projects which we have had milestones. There are projects where we have commenced. So I can tell you again, this is a ministry which is today extremely focused on delivering on development assistance abroad. And among the examples, we were the first country to actually complete a project in the Rakhine state. We built 250 houses there. They're ready to go. With Nepal, Prime Minister inaugurated the Motihari Amlekhganj pipeline. We have completed 50,000 houses, which we had committed to do after the Nepal earthquake in Nuwakot and Gorkha districts. In Bhutan, Prime Minister inaugurated the Mangdechu Dam. He also inaugurated the Earthlink station. And in Bangladesh, in fact, again, we've just completed the first vocational training institute at Khulna. We started work on the Parvatipur-Siliguri high-speed diesel, what we call friendship pipeline. We've also started work on the Agartala-Akhora railway line. We've had in Sri Lanka the inauguration of the 1990 ambulance service, which enjoys enormous popularity there in the eastern province in Nampare. We have in Maldives completed and inaugurated the composite training facility for the Maldivian Defense Forces, 2 coastal surveillance radars as well. Prime Minister promised during his visit the renovation of Friday Mosque, and we've already started work of that in Maldives. In Mauritius, we've completed the ENT hospital. In Kenya, for example, we've just finished a textile factory. In Cambodia, we've done a clinic and a school. And all of this, I'm giving you as a snapshot of really what's happened in the last 100 days. And you can expect, this pace of work to really carry on for the next 5 years. Now, while I've spoken largely of our ministry, I must also acknowledge the partnerships with other ministries, which is so central for us to deliver on the practical aspects of our foreign policy. Here, I must particularly recognize the Department of Posts, because they've been a very, very positive, energetic partner in the spread of our Passport Seva Kendras through the country. We are doing it today by locating them in post offices. In the last 100 days, we have opened 6 more. I just opened one this weekend at Rajpipla in Gujarat. And similarly, we have partnered with the Human Resources Development Ministry. Yesterday, we had a function here. This was our largest initiative with the ASEAN, where we announced 1,000 postdoctoral scholarships at IITs, which I think would certainly in educational cooperation in science and technology side would be among our major initiatives. So that broadly is a picture, and I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge actually the support that we've got from the Ministry of Finance. When I looked at our budget figures, I felt that they had done justice to a foreign policy which was more ambitious, which had a larger vision. In fact, when I look back today, the foreign ministry's budget is about 40% higher than where it was in 2014. So that gives you a sort of a sense of how much support we have got from the Ministry of Finance. So let me conclude by saying really my sense of these 100 days is that we have picked up on where we left off over a 5-year period. I think the sort of the vehicle is already in 4th, if not 5th gear. And I would say this with great objectivity. I think the record over the last 5 years has been very much that the country's standing in the world has gone up. I think people recognize it. I think the Indian people recognize it, and it was one of the many factors for the vote of confidence which was given to the Modi government. So I'm very today very honored, very privileged to lead the MEA team to take the last 5 years forward for the next 5. So once again, thank you for your attention, and I'd be delighted to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we move into the Q&A round, 3 simple points. Even if I identify yourself, please do introduce yourself, your name and the organization's name. 1 question. Please avoid linked question. And the third, which is very important, is that we will try to cover 1 topic in 1 go. So if, for example, the first question relates to the neighborhood, we will try to cover that topic before we move to the next topic, so that we can cover as many topics as possible in the limited time which we have. So we can start with the first one. Siddhant.
Hi Sam, Siddhant from Beyond. My question is on India-US relationship. We know the Indian Prime Minister will be going and meeting him 3rd time perhaps in this year. There are contentious issues, trade being the topmost. When can we see this issue being resolved? When can we expect a resolution or perhaps a trade deal?
I will take other questions on US as well, India-US relationship. Manish. And then Manish in front.
Manish Chand, the India Rights Network. Prime Minister is going to be meeting President Trump twice, once in Texas and once in New York. When we talk about the quality of India-US relationship, you know, I mean, there, apart from the contentious issues, there is also President Trump's unpredictability, especially his notorious flip-flops on the Kashmir issue. Where do you see, I mean, with this kind of unpredictability, where do you see the issues dissolving themselves? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Manish. Smita, you have a question?
Smita Sharma. Several US congressmen, military committees have raised concerns about the human rights situation in Kashmir. As the Prime Minister heads there, and the External Affairs Ministry has been doing much firefighting about the internal situation in the state. Is there any assessment that you have in terms of by when can at least the political detentions, be phased out, or it's going to get over, or is the detention going to be a normal till the neighborhood state, till the neighbor doesn't turn into a normal state?
Smita, this pertains to perhaps a later topic. We are only talking about India-US relationship. Manish, you have a question?
सर मैं मनीष झा हूँ TV9 भारतवर्ष से और मेरा सवाल ये है कि 4 दिन बाद जब प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी और प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप दोनों एक ही मंच पर होंगे, 50,000 से ज़्यादा लोगों की भीड़ होगी, तो कश्मीर पर भारत के फैसले के बाद ये कैसा मैसेज होगा पाकिस्तान के लिए या दुनिया के लिए जब दो बड़े देश के नेता एक साथ मंच पर होंगे?
Narima, you have one? Maybe sir, the last one before.
Nainima Basu from the print. Do we plan to ask for a waiver on the Iran sanctions, so-called, from the US, as far as the waiver is concerned on purchasing oil from Iran? Thank you.
Thank you.
There are some common elements in the questions which you have asked. So rather than go question by question, I'd go sort of subject by subject. Let me start with India, US and the trade issue. And you know, I think somebody described it as contentious, somebody used the word unpredictable. I mean, that was not the relationship, that was a person. But first of all, let me make this point that India-US relations have come a long way. I mean, look today at the quality of the relationship, look at the amount of trade, look at the political comfort, look at the security cooperation, look at the movement of people, you know, whether you look at the business, at students, at research. I mean, there is no facet of the relationship today which hasn't sort of gone upwards really over the last 20 years. And it has gone through repeated changes of administration. I mean, it was, Democrat, Clinton, then George Bush, then Obama, then Trump. And the trajectory was always upwards. And even today, even as we are planning, for example, like an event like Houston, the thinking is from our side is actually very bipartisan. And from their side also, the approach is very bipartisan. So the first thing I want to reassure all of you, the relationship is in very good health. Okay, I'm very satisfied about what has happened in the last few years. I'm very optimistic about where we are going. Now, as the relationship grows, as any relationship grows, there will be issues. I mean, the only way you cannot have a trade problem is if you don't trade. And trade problem, by the way, often happens with people you are closest to, because actually it's with them that you do the most trade. So, its trade problems are normal. In fact, in many ways, they're reflective of a very substantial relationship. So now let me give you my prognosis on the trade issues. We've been talking to the Americans, we've engaged them for many months now. Certainly that in that 100-day record, I mean, this is not my remit, it is CIM's remit, but certainly there have been a lot of conversations over the last 100 days. And I have always been optimistic that, the time will come when after a lot of these exchanges, mostly at a bureaucratic level, there would be an effort to take it to a higher level, then sit down and see where we can find a sort of a common ground where there's give and take, and find ways by which it works for both of us. So my expectation is that, some of the sharper edges that many of you seem to have picked up, that they would be addressed in some form in the not too distant future. Exactly which ones? I mean, all that is really the Commerce Minister's remit. But again, I would say, even if I were to take that as a given, I would point to you a glass which